Hello, well, Shkona here, and today in the book club we're gonna talk about the work of Ukrainian author Andriy Lyubka in a book called Karbid. So once in a while I'm trying to discover something new in the book world, and that is why I basically went once to the Ukrainian bookstore and I was going through the modern things that are being out there, and obviously I wanted to read some of the Ukrainian modern authors, and one of the suggestions was the Andriy Lyubka, and who is quite young author. I think he's hailing from the West Ukraine, and basically his novel called Karbid, I think it was also his debut novel, and I decided to give it a shot. I pretty much judged it just by the cover, because I think there was just a short description at the back saying it's gonna be really funny and interesting story out of our nowadays reality. So I thought, yeah, I can give it a shot. Okay, so let's probably try to summarize the plot a bit. So the whole story is around the main character called Tis, or Mikhail Chvak, who is the teacher of history in the local school in the town of Vedmediv in the western Ukraine, close to the border with Hungary. And basically he's a drunkard and he smells terribly, something that you already learned from the very first page of the book, which I personally found disgusting, especially the language in which it was described. So I really wonder how editor found this also hilarious and ridiculous and decided to leave it in the book. And there were a lot of moments like this which I would personally try to cut off or describe in some other words. How about that? It's a literature and it needs to be on a certain level. It's not like a street language should be used all over the place, especially when you're talking as an author in the book. But this is just my opinion. So basically this history teacher, he was thinking about the great plan. So after one of the nights when he was super drunk, he came up with an idea of building a tunnel which will connect Ukraine and Hungary. So there will be actually no borders and Ukraine will finally be Euro-integrated in the European Union. And the whole book was kind of written at the time when we had the whole movement in Ukraine going in terms of the Euro integration and associations with the European Union. So back in the days it was quite an important topic, and it still is. Unfortunately, a lot of grief was still brought by the whole movement which started back in the days, and as much as the ideal picture of Ukraine becoming part of the Europe was pretty much just a disguise for some terrible things happening and terrible events that unfortunately are happening in my country right now. So that is why it's quite an interesting topic to discuss. Okay, so Tis had this idea of building a tunnel, and a lot of people started to get on board with this, and all of them were pretty much looking after their personal interests, because the whole idea of using the tunnel was to really smuggle goods and drugs and sometimes even organs and other illegal products into the Europe from Ukraine. So there were a lot of events happening around, and pretty much trying to... I think most of the characters were pretty much shown on the surface, besides the main character, of whom there was a point of explaining his transformation, how he came to this particular life, and that he was always this idealist patriot person who was really loving the Ukraine, the history of it. That's how he also fell in love with his wife, by just a really funny incident that saw her standing with the book of Taras Shevchenko, a famous Ukrainian writer. That is why he thought he found the perfect woman in his life. So we learn a bit more about the character, and at some point he pretty much shows that he's not that stupid, and that at some point of time, by the unfortunate sequence of the events, he learns that there is a plan to get rid of him, and he decides to escape through the tunnel that he just made. So he pretty much invited his wife to go out with him, and they went straight into the tunnel, and then it all happened. So that's pretty much the whole book. And I really have a lot of criticism about the use of language, because the book itself could have been way better if the language was used in a much better and appropriate way. It wasn't like really the literature style, but more like really street style, and something that really disgusted in a lot of times. Some of the descriptions that were not really necessary. And I think at the very beginning, the first third of the book, it was really tried to be funny and comic, and there were a lot of terrible jokes, and there was a disgusting sense of humor by the author was shown there. And then I think the other 2/3, at least half of the book, it was already flowing normally. Either it's me getting used to the language, or it's either it actually became less I need to make it funny and more okay, I should just write it in a more serious way. And even though, there were a lot of cliches, I wouldn't say there was anything super original in it, but I think that it was interesting story about like the hero main transformation, at least showing it from the different sides. So it's not as if like it was a flayed character. The main one. At some like there was a transformation period for him, and it was kinda described why he was going through the bad times in his life. That is why he didn't seem that bad after all, and that he probably was the only lost idealist of this whole Vedmetiv, still thinking of the great patriotic acts rather than his personal needs, even though right at the end of the day, despite him saying that his whole idea will help the whole Ukrainians and the high ideals that he was having, he still decided to escape, which pretty much would mean that he kind of gave up on his ideas, because he wouldn't really be able to do anything from the other side, which kind of sucks, because that's a really weird way to end the story, I think, because you were showing the character with really high ideals, with really high patriotism in it, and then he decides to leave, even though he was still trying to show that he's still being patriotic, but he escaped. There is nothing bad about it. Like, he really thought about his wife to help her escape as well, and himself, of course. But it was just questionable looking at the whole way of how it all started. And I think the whole impulse of him really thinking for a long time that this tunnel would actually help people to have a better life, that was super weird, and that no one actually ever asked him about it. Because I know, like, yes, he did share it with his friend who is a smuggler, that's why he has his own opinion about it, but then everybody were quite open about why they want to use the tunnel for, and nobody ever treated him seriously, which was super stupid of him not to do anything with it. Because then at the end, he wasn't shown as really stupid character, which was a random transformation, like he was really acting not part of himself. That is why the book is rather weak, I would say. The transformations of the character are weird. There wasn't a full-on satire, there wasn't full-on humor in it, and there were a lot of different elements that all together you kind of didn't really fit in, and the story wasn't really flowing nicely, and the humor level was really at the, middle school stuff, when people thinking that word shit is just funny already. So, it's not as if like I'm disappointed about it, but I really cannot understand why there were so many reviews saying that this book is one of the greatest masterpieces of the modern Ukrainian literature. And if it is one of the masterpieces of modern Ukrainian literature, then I have bad news for the future. Well, I hope you guys also would find out that I think the big question here, which I don't think necessarily was implied by the author, is that when some terrible things being disguised as patriotism, I think this is something that we all should beware of and be aware of, and that's why let's be woke and look around what's happening. So that was my book review. Thank you very much for listening, and goodbye.